Very good evening and welcome to Power News. I'm Johi Rajput. In today's episode, we're going to discuss distribution reforms key to power sector sustainability. And to discuss the same, we've been joined by Dr. Pramod, Chairperson, CERC. Mr. P.K. Thakkar, Director Technical, REC. Mr. Praveer, Sinha, CEO, TPDDL and ED Tata Power. And Mr. Kameswara, Director, PwC. Very good evening and welcome to Power News. Well, even after 65 years of independence, we lack in supplying reliable and affordable electricity to most of the population. If we leave some of the metro cities, major towns in the entire country face 6 to 8 hours of power cut. Distribution is the weakest link of a power system, and though power sector reform was initiated by the government long back, even today the power distribution sector has not achieved the financial viability, and most of the discoms in the country are either bankrupt or cash-starved. Dr. Dev.
All along, electricity has been treated like a public good, and being a public good, question comes is that it is the government's responsibility how to provide it and how to do it so that the consumer satisfaction is met. But whereas we moved to kind of a market commodity approach in the new electricity law, and that's why the reforms in the distribution really come in that 2003 law. But now we have 10 years, and important thing was that tariffs for the distribution companies, because what used to be the electricity boards have become distribution companies over the years, and then they should be determined by regulatory commissions on a periodic basis. And recently we had Appellate Tribunal on Electricity judgment, famously known as OF1, and it's a very good thing that after this Appellate OP1, 20 state regulatory commissions had determined tariff, given a fairly sufficient hike. But that does not mean that the gap has been bridged, because if a state regulatory commission had not determined tariff for last 3-4 years, at one go you can't really increase the tariff by 60-70%. It will have to be done in stages, but we have started moving in that direction. So that's the what I would call is the change that has started taking place. So all these laws that we had, its enforcement is now happening, and also there was the Shinglu committee which looked into it and made recommendation. Of course, there is a still issue of the long, how huge outstanding dues, how they had to be now settled. So that proposal is still in a stage of discussion stage.
The cumulative losses of the distribution utilities increased from rupees 1.22 trillion in 2009-10 to rupees 1.8 trillion as of March 2011. Don't you feel the regulatory and governance failure at sub-transmission and distribution level has resulted in mammoth losses in the distribution sector?
The basic problem, as Dr. Dev rightly pointed out, is that the tariff today is not cost reflective. It is not that today there is no power in the system. In the country, there is definitely power which is available. The problem is that there is no money with the state governments or the state distribution companies to buy that power, and until and unless they have money to buy the power and pay for it, no generator will supply them power. They also do not have money for carrying out the system improvement, the reliability, the loss reduction. So, until and unless the tariffs become cost reflective, it would be very difficult.
The financial bankruptcy of discoms has also threatened the upstream generating companies and capacity addition, as no generator is able to get money to run his plants from distribution companies. It would further affect the entire power business chain.
Today, it's not only stalling distribution, but also generation investments, because it's a huge counterparty risk which is sitting on them. And that is not just the mainstream, but also renewables who don't get paid in time. So there's a whole set of investment all around the chain which is at risk because of this counterparty thing. But we also need to see if this is sufficient. This is necessary, but probably not sufficient. What you also need to have is a reasonable competition going on in the system, by which I don't necessarily mean open access competition, but you need to have a benchmark competition. If you had a mix of ownership, is not just 10-15%, but a significant chunk in private participation, it also drives regulators to compare and benchmark these companies against the rest. It also gives a very good motive to the rest of the system to enhance and improve. So I think we need to look at things beyond that as well.
For timely tariff hikes, Appellate Tribunal ordered SCRC to increase tariff on suo motu basis. As many SEBs don't file the tariff petition on time, how might the decision of Tribunal be helpful in annual tariff fixation?
Very recently, if you see, many states, they have increased the tariff, be it Tamil Nadu, where from past 8 to 9 years, there was no tariff increase. UP has done it, Haryana has done it. So, I think the distribution companies are now becoming aware that that is the only probably solution, and I think state government also governments, they have also to support by the subsidy, providing the subsidy, not just books adjustments.
If you talk about tariff increase today, that will only benefits a point in time, which is 4-5 years down the line, and the planning process before that. So really we need to look at 7 years ahead in these matters. So an increase today is not an issue. In fact, the point is it needs to be more disciplined and regular. The lack of regularity is what added to the cost, because the capital costs are significantly higher as well. The second element is this is huge short-term debt sitting on the books, and which is why the state utilities are unable to buy from open market as they did about in 2007-8, for example. Unless that is restructured, they don't have any operating room. So I think we need to necessarily bite the bullet and say this short-term debt has to be converted.
Government was planning a bailout package for the DISCOMs. Given the mounting losses of the DISCOM, the Finance Ministry issued a directive to the banks to stop lending to the DISCOMs, triggering fears that there could be defaults on outstanding loans. In absence of this comprehensive revival package to restructure and reduce the debt burden of DISCOMs, how could this financial crisis be resolved?
Okay, before I respond to your question, we have been talking about the investment required for the distribution. Central government introduced two good schemes for distribution. That was Rajiv Gandhi Grameen Vidyutikaran Yojana, in which 90% subsidy was provided to the states, and APDRP. Then it was restructured APDRP. And very recently, we have come out with National Electricity Fund, where it is an interest subsidy scheme, where 3 to 7% interest subsidy would be provided. Now, responding to your question, yes, there were probably directives from the ministry, finance ministry to the banks, but that was just to discipline them. And now, the bailout package has been given to them, in which the loan has been restructured, and 3 years moratorium will be there, and 10 years tenor will be there for the loans.
Certain improvements in technical, in commercial loss reduction, in the quality of service has to be benchmarked, and along with that the bailout package has to be done. And the states have to go for commercially running these corporations. One of the biggest benefits that Delhi has got, earlier Delhi government used to spend or put nearly 2,000 crores as subsidy amount for power sector. In last 7 years, no subsidy has been paid, and the same money Delhi government now uses for making new roads, the metro rail, the better infrastructure facilities. So it's a huge saving also for the state government, and the sector then survives on its own and it's sustainable.
We'll carry on this discussion, but after this short break. You stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Power News. In today's episode, we're going to discuss distribution reforms key to power sector sustainability. Due to poor financial condition, DISCOMs don't want to buy power from the power traders or exchange and opt to overdraw power from the grid, which causes indiscipline and recently led to grid failure. Though the central government has threatened that in the case of overdrawal, chief secretaries may be jailed, do we have some strict laws in place to prevent overdrawal?
We have provisions which are like your traffic laws, and they have to be obeyed in letter and spirit. It is not that you have any leeway. Now, also realizing that you can't really have all the time perfect scheduling, that whatever you say that you are going to generate and you are going to draw. And also this frequency which used to drop because of overdrawal, we have a commercial mechanism which is called the unscheduled interchange. So, if you were to overdraw, then you have to pay much higher. If you underdraw or you are strengthening the thing, then you are rewarded, but you can't go on pumping energy. So, that is why the balance is maintained. In the critical range, if you overdraw, then you have to pay for that 1 unit almost 17 or 18 rupees. Earlier what we were discussing about the financial health of the distribution companies. So, the tendency is that if you want to buy electricity in market, you have to pay upfront, whereas UI mechanism is such, even if you have to pay 15 rupees, that had to be paid later, you can overdraw. And we have issued now personal penalty notices to all that them. But and also we had prepared a scheme under which you should not be building up these arrears. You have to open letter of credit. Now, those letters of credit also have not been issued. So, we have issued notices to all the MDs of transmission companies that why action should not be taken against them. So, this is we are talking of on one hand you need financial discipline, on the other hand you also need grid discipline.
People go and do the overdrawal of power because the settlement takes a long time. It is not that you have to pay the money upfront, which in normal cases you have to open letter of credit and pay within a week and all that. So, here the settlement takes place after 6 months, 1 year, and to that extent they keep on drawing that power. And there were states in northern region, and in fact all the states excepting for Chandigarh, they were overdrawing from 100, 150 megawatt to 1000 megawatt, and this was consistent. If you take out the data, you will find that 1000 megawatt, 800, 500, 700, and that sort of drawal was taking place by each of the states. Most of the time the state load dispatch center, which is supposed to enforce the grid, are again employees of the state distribution company, and they are under tremendous pressure from the state government and the officers from the state government. And because of that reason, most of the time they would allow the states to go for the grid indiscipline and not the grid discipline.
Independent working of NLDC and SLDC is a must for bringing grid discipline, but even after 7 years of its inception, NLDC works as an integral part of power grid and SLDC are mostly governed by the state power department and state governments. Don't you feel we need to strictly define the role of NLDC and SLDCs and its function, autonomy to bring discipline in the grid?
I think it's not a challenge as much as the roles, and there may be different levels. I mean, the same federal system we have, so does the US and Australia, and they face exactly similar situations of having two-tiered regulators, policies and so on and so forth, and it can work fairly well as long as the current rules and regulations are followed. I think the challenge is somewhat beyond that. The challenge is twofold. One is having properly equipped and information, and that's what today the SLDCs lack. They're severely handicapped in terms of the information that they have and how they're able to act upon it.
We insisted that when we are asking states to give autonomy to state load dispatch centers, we must set an example, and that's why this POSOCO was created. It is a completely autonomous. The CO has independence. Only reason is that it is a subsidiary today, because what happens is that it will be a very small corporation compared to power grid, and as we know, it being a public sector, the salary structure that you can adopt, that will be something which will be very adverse, because nobody would like to come and work in POSOCO. So, that is the reason. Difficulty in the states comes is that they have been part of the transmission company utility now, and again it is a very small organization, but you can't have complete autonomy unless you know that you are going to grow with that organization, or you can have that kind of a subsidiary structure which we had done, which is not the best solution, but that is the second best solution. Ideal solution would be it should be a completely independent, even all terms, not a subsidiary, but at least the subsidiary has given that much this thing. So, we will have to work on that, because again some people talk about why not have a national cadre, but you see state employees won't like to move from one state to other state. So, that also, so this is really an issue which we need to address. So, that is why I thought I just intervene and mention this.
One of the major reasons for poor financial health of power discoms is high AT&C losses, which are in tune of 40%. Government says that in APDRP1, there was no way in which we could work out the baseline data or compute the AT&C losses. So, the restructured APDRP first addressed the issue of unmetered supply and proper data acquisition system. Only then it was supposed to take up the issue of system upgradation and equipment modernization. But even after 4 years of its launch in July 2008, not much has been achieved. Why our APDRP could not yield the desired result?
Our APDRP program, I can't say that it is going as per the expected pace. It is a bit delayed, but I think the issues involved in that were the ring fencing of the areas and IT enabling. We thought it would be possible to complete that job in 1 year or 1.5 years. It took more than that, because the IT industry, we thought that they would rope in the electrical engineers, work together and find out some mechanism. It didn't click that way. That's why it took a little longer, but I think now that phase is over, and now we are into implementation of part B. This would pick up.
Basically, in the part A of the program, it is the mapping of the assets, and that exercise, the GIS, the SCADA setting, is a very cumbersome exercise, which involves going door to door and mapping all the poles, all the meters, all the assets that you have. Now, the problem was that there were not many people in the country who knew about it. People who knew the IT part of it did not know the electrical technology, and people who knew the electrical technology did not know the IT part of it. And to that extent, there were a lot of pitfalls in the process. But the part B, which is much simpler to handle, where you do the system improvements, that I think the states should be able to complete it. They are looking at 24-month schedule, but maybe in 36-month schedule they should be able to complete.
As per CERC guidelines, discoms can pass on variable fuel costs to the consumers, but it was not applicable for projects backed through international competitive bidding route. But recently, as per Attorney General remarkable judgment, CERC can revise long-term PPA unilaterally. How much this decision would impact the mood of private power companies, as around 20,000 megawatt capacity of major independent power producers like Tata, Adani, SR and Reliance were at stake?
See, it is the Attorney General's opinion, legal opinion. It is not the decision. Attorney General was, that reference was made by not CERC, a forum of regulator. Because the issue came is that if you have a power station in one state and it is supplying electricity to more than one state, and it is done through the competitive bidding, and if any dispute arises, then which regulatory commission will decide? Because otherwise you will have a very anomalous situation that you have 2 or 3 PPAs and 3 regulatory commissions on the disputed matter come with different decisions. So, what the Attorney General has said that in that case it becomes a project supplying to more than one state, it is the interstate, it is a composite scheme. So, the central commission will be the authority to decide. Now, when you talk about the existing PPAs, it will depend on each case. What are the wordings of that PPA? What kind of a dispute resolution mechanism has been given there? So, one cannot generalize. So, what Attorney General talks about there is the regulatory. It says that the regulatory powers are much bigger, but then that means that it does not mean that you can go and open any PPA. Depending upon what the PPA says and what the purchasing parties, their views are. So, one can't really today pronounce any judgment on that what will be.
No, it's a positive thing because it brings, it's not a policy issue, it's a more economic regulatory issue. So you need to look at the economics and the regulatory aspects of that. So it's positive to that aspect. But it is not going to be a straightforward thing to deal with because the number of complex issues involved in this, it is put up for competitive bidding. So there are elements that relate to a bid process. It involves transfer pricing issues. So I may lose in power plant, but I'm making money in coal. So it's not a very straightforward thing to deal with. A number of aspects have to be kept in mind.
Time to take another short break. You keep watching Power News. Welcome back, you're watching Power News. In today's episode, we're going to discuss distribution reforms key to power sector sustainability. Distribution franchises are currently seen as the way forward. Bhiwandi franchisee has shown a remarkable performance. Distribution franchise is considered a softer alternative, which allows the state to delegate operations to the private sector without losing ownership of the assets. Do you feel franchisee system is the best model for private participation in power distribution segment?
Except after Delhi, there has been no privatization, and in fact there seems to be a kind of a political mindset which finds privatization becomes something not to be touched. So the solution has been input based franchising, and that seems to be much more politically acceptable, and that's the reason why Shinglu committee has recommended it, and also in the forum of regulators we have prepared a model agreement. And now the Ministry of Power is advocating that. That's what should be really the approach.
One of the issues with the various investment-led programs is that they create the infrastructure. But the fundamental challenge here is what happens to that information. Now, what we have seen working with utilities, when the information comes, the ability to digest, act, and the incentive to act upon it is all diluted. It isn't there in many places. That is a fundamental change when you put in a private partnership, let's say a 15-year period. It's essentially a glorified O&M contract, but certainly it has the incentives to capture in terms of efficiency improvement. So that's a very fundamental difference. In other words, I have incentive to improve efficiency at the earliest, and the faster I'm able to do it pays for my capital investment as well. Now we can enhance that model further, and that becomes closer to a true privatization. And as I said, if the state continues to own, there is very little that anyone can do to make it work. But if you have other operators doing that, there are a number of options that you can take in terms of rebidding, in terms of enhancing the incentives, in terms of the fallback mechanism, the state taking over again. So we need to look at the model, notwithstanding the various political affiliations of the models.
Issue really is that are there that many entities who can take such responsibility? We need to have more such entities who will take over that. That is the real challenge.
It may not be able to, it may not be possible to extend one model across the country. So you have been talking about franchisee model. The franchisee model which is successful in Maharashtra may not be successful in UP or maybe in Bihar or Jharkhand. So I think this has to be worked out separately, which model would be successful where. Maybe franchisee model in South and in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and maybe private public participation in other areas. That has to be worked out.
Delhi is a typical public-private partnership. In Delhi, this has been a very successful model, and in last 10 years, whether it is on any technical parameters or on any financial parameter, things have improved, and also from commercial perspective, from consumer perspective also, things have improved. I think the awareness level amongst the consumers are going up, and this is matter of time, sooner than later, that people will ask for quality supply, and governments will have to take decisions in the interest of the consumer. So I feel that the time has come. The regulators have taken suo moto lot of actions, and I am sure we are moving towards a direction where things will improve in the power sector.
For bringing reforms in the power sector, role of state power regulator is very important, but in recent times many of state regulators have not been carrying out their duties as mandated by the Electricity Act. Don't you think that the state regulators' performance should also be reviewed periodically?
We have formulated our own standards of performance to evaluate the regulators. So, that is ready. What we discussed that last our meeting in FOR in Visakhapatnam, we agreed what those will be. They will be very transparent. But what we want to do is have some again third party which can look at it and certify that what has been done. Otherwise, the credibility may not be there. So, we are working towards that, we are aware of it. I think that seems to be the best way, that we have a third party which looks at it, the work done by the Secretariat of the Forum, which has done this evaluation, and that evaluation is published and done.
We end this discussion here. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us here in Power News. Thank you so much.